It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. Glad you're here for a Depeche Mode podcast this week. I have quite a bit to get to on the show this week. A rock and roll induction ceremony details. Also, the Violator 12-inch singles collection has been released. I'll have information on that. Listener feedback, thank you for writing in to TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Got a handful of emails to share with you this week. I discovered a new band, not Depeche Mode related, but being a Depeche Mode fan that you are, might be interested in what I found. I'm curious if you've ever heard of this band before, and also this genre of music. So I'll talk just a little bit about that on the show this week. But actually, we do have quite a bit to get to. My Nerd World is brought to you by My Nerd World and MyNerdWorld.net. At MyNerdWorld.net, you can check out a daily blog that I write. Also, all things relating to the My Nerd World podcast and the Embarq science fiction space opera series. You're a fan of Depeche Mode, I can tell because you're here. If you're also a fan of science fiction, you definitely want to go and check these books out, not just because I wrote them, but because they're a lot of fun. And the main hero in the books is a Depeche Mode fan. So I'll have more details about that a little bit later on in the show. It is My Nerd World, a Depeche Mode podcast, and I am your host, Jon Justice. Glad you were with the show again this week. I hope wherever you are that you are healthy and that you are happy and that you are safe. So I want to start off here with the show this week. Somebody had mentioned to me in one of my other podcasts, my Star Wars podcast, to be more specific. They had suggested, right, because we're in a lull for news when it comes to Star Wars. If you're familiar with the shows that I do here on My Nerd World at all, you probably know that apart from my faith, right, my faith in God, my family, my job, the three things in life that fill my life with joy beyond those things, it is Depeche Mode, it is Star Wars, and it is NASCAR. And those three things kind of rotate importance depending on mood, season, time of year, that kind of thing. So I do a Star Wars podcast, and somebody has suggested, because there's kind of a lull when it comes to Star Wars news, there's a lull when it comes to all news, for crying out loud, but that I do some shows focusing on the deleted scenes of Star Wars. And that got me thinking about episodes in the future where we can talk about, and I can cover some of my favorite B-sides. The B-side history of Depeche Mode is really just fascinating to me. The whole creative process that the band goes through, and why certain songs are chosen and are not chosen to end up on albums. I think earlier in Depeche Mode's career, it was, well, it's in my view, and I'm gonna get into this comprehensively in future episodes. But just as a quick sort of, spitball hot take. My spitball hot take on this is that early in Depeche Mode's career, when you look at some of their B-sides, I imagine for the band it probably was difficult to decide which songs were going to end up on an album earlier in their career and which songs weren't. And I mean that because a lot of the B-sides of their early career, especially Leave It in Your Memory, you look at Shout. And those are probably not the greatest examples, but the B-sides in the early part of their career in the 80s, they seem to align a lot closer with the songs that are chosen for the album. Like if you have flip-flopped any of those particular songs, a handful of B-sides on any particular early Depeche Mode record, it may not have been all that noticeable that those were B-sides. As you get later in their career, I think it becomes kind of more obvious why certain songs were not chosen as album releases. We look at Violator, and we'll talk a little bit about the Violator 12-inch singles. You look at Violator, and you look at a song like Sea of Sin or Happiest Girl. Two songs that I absolutely love, but I also understand why those particular tracks didn't land on the Violator album, right? It's almost a perfect record with those 9 tracks. And I could see how the addition of those tracks may have thrown things off. I think there's also, thrown the vibe and the feel of the album off. I also think there's an argument to be made that in some of their later releases, some albums could have been pared down quite a bit, and it would have benefited the albums more. I think when you look at Ultra is not the best example, and maybe Exciter. I think if you would pare down some of the songs on Exciter, you might have made a tighter record. I do believe it's the case when it comes to Playing the Angel, Delta Machine, Sounds of the Universe. I think those albums would have had a better opportunity to feel a little bit more cohesive if they had whittled down the track list a little bit. Hopefully still getting the songs that they removed. I mean, there are certain songs in those eras that I would have, Light from the Sounds of the Universe era. I really love that song. Anyways, I bring all of this up because I listened to one particular B-side a ton, and that's My Joy. My Joy from the Songs of Faith and Devotion era. While I understand why that particular song didn't land on the album, I think if it had ended up on the album, it would not have particularly fit, even though it definitely sounds like a song from that era. The drums in that song are absolutely amazing. It's a little bit of a minimalist song in terms of its lyrical content, but I absolutely love that song. I also wouldn't have traded it for any of the songs on Songs of Faith and Devotion. But that particular song, for whatever reason, has resonated with me for decades now. But for years, and I've always just been a huge, huge fan. It's probably one of my favorite B-sides. And I only bring it up because it's the last song that I listened to before I sat down to record the podcast this week. And I wanted to, I wanted to share it. I wanted to share it with you. It's funny because my whole commentary is very contradictory just a moment ago to how I felt when I was younger. When I was younger, in the 90s, in 1990-91, when Violator came out, I remember just being such a massive fan of the band. I was somewhat disappointed that Violator was only 9 tracks. And I remember going to the import store, Hyde Park Corner in Irvine, California, and I've told the story before on the show, but I remember finding out from the guy that works at the store via the magazine that I got, Q. That was the first time we'd seen Dave and his new iteration during that Songs of Faith and the heroin chic look of long-haired look of Dave Gahan. But I remember the article, and I was talking with the guy that worked at the store. I remember the article actually pointed out that Songs of Faith and Devotion was going to have more tracks on it than were on Violator. And I'll never forget the conversation. The guy working behind the counter was like, "Hey, but good news for you, because it's going to be a longer album than it was for Violator." And it must have been a conversation that we'd had like in that moment, because I don't think I knew the guy well enough to where he would have been like aware that I had made comments about that all the time. It contradicts what I said a moment ago, because in retrospect now, having all these albums since the 90s and the music that the band's released, I see the value now in maybe quality versus quantity. And again, how I think several of their releases could have definitely benefited from, being scaled down a bit and just getting to a core group of 9 songs. So just a quick sort of, take, because I was listening to My Joy and I dug the song and I wanted to share it with you. That's all I really have on that particular subject. Let's get to some of the news this week on the show. The Depeche Mode 12-inch vinyl singles collection box set came out this week. The limited edition deluxe box set contains 10 12-inch vinyl discs showcasing the singles Personal Jesus, Enjoy the Silence, Policy of Truth, and World in My Eyes. From their earliest days as a band, this comes officially from the Depeche Mode website, Depeche Mode have championed the 12-inch vinyl, embracing the singular power of the format and avenues of innovation the format opened up. The 12-inch single allowed the band to explore new sonic possibilities, while the tactile, physical beauty of the packaging gave Depeche Mode room to develop a sophisticated and commanding visual aesthetic. It's a very unique take a sophisticated and commanding visual aesthetic. Depeche Mode used their singles discography as a means of offering left-field remixes and other delights for their fans. Violator, the 12-inch singles, contains the original and special edition versions of each single from the album, including the etched vinyl version of Enjoy the Silence, the blue sealed edition of World in My Eyes, plus a bonus promo 12-inch of World in My Eyes, which features exclusive rarities. All the discs are mastered from the original tapes and are packaged in deluxe numbered boxes with reproductions of the original UK marketing poster for Enjoy the Silence and download cards. That Violator era, and I covered this extensively on the specific Violator show that was done many, many months ago. But that Violator era, obviously in terms of the music, right, and the tour, is incredible. Apex Mountain, I'm a big fan of the Rewatchables podcast, and Bill Simmons on there has categories in that podcast, and he often, one of the categories they talk about when they're talking about rewatching movies that are most rewatchable is, is this a particular Apex Mountain, the peak of any actor or actress's career in this particular movie they're talking about. I am going to put out the argument that the Apex Mountain for Depeche Mode was Violator. I haven't looked at the raw numbers in terms of sort of tour attendance or record sales, but certainly this era, right? Bigger than Music for the Masses, and only competition I could see would be the Songs of Faith and Devotion era, but of course that was tinged with so much controversy, or with the entire band. I really do think that the Violator era was Depeche Mode's, Apex Mountain. And I think there's an argument to be made, and I'd be curious to hear from you, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, about whether or not let's just stick with that. Let's stick with Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion. Which of those two eras are Depeche Mode's Apex Mountain? And if you disagree, if you think it's before that or you think it's after that, I'd be curious as well. One of the listener feedback emails this week kind of addresses a core issue with the band that, in my opinion, makes that Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion those two eras of the band arguable for Apex Mountain, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. For me personally, though, the Violator era is probably Depeche Mode's Apex Mountain. From the musical standpoint, from the touring standpoint, as I mentioned, but also the visual standpoint. The marketing around Violator was just incredible. And that snapshot in time for me as a young person growing up in Southern California listening to K-Rock radio, that album that came out, the record signing in Hollywood that took place that I've talked about before on the show, the tours, Dodger Stadium, Universal Amphitheater, all of it. And again, the marketing aspect and the packaging. I mean, it's just, that was one of my favorite years ever of my life. Favorite few years, all surrounding Depeche Mode. Just the vibe from the fans, meeting new fans, the T-shirts, getting the album title Violator and going, what a weird title for an album. But then getting this stark, clean, black cover with just the red rose, the font that Anton used. I mean, the entire artwork marketing for all these releases is just, again, the only thing, in my opinion, that comes close to rivaling that would be the Songs of Faith and Devotion era. But for me personally, Violator, takes the cake as the apex of that. And it makes me a little bit jealous. Like, this is the only singles box set that I've seen so far that I actually, without even owning a record player right now, would consider getting. I'm pretty sure I have all the singles already on 12-inch from this era. I stopped collecting vinyl a long time ago. I mean, this was probably the first batch of vinyl that I still collected from the band, and everything after that was, cassettes and then the CDs, obviously, moving forward. This particular 12-inch vinyl set, though, might even be worth getting, just to have it, but then also have the reproduced artwork in that format, in that large 12-inch packaging format. I think would be a good thing to add to my collection. So I may actually have to take a look at that when I get done with the show today. All right, let's move on to the next story. The live induction ceremony event for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because of COVID-19, right? Because of that, has been moved. It's now been replaced with an HBO special in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so here are some of the details. An induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame may be the highest achievement accolade for recording artists in our time. A multitude of instantly recognizable artists, bands like the Beach Boys and Kiss, Madonna, Public Enemy, have all received the honor. And in 2020, even more artists will join their ranks. Every year, the induction ceremony takes place at a live event, complete with concert performances and festivities. However, amid the social distancing regulations contrived by the COVID-19 pandemic, the ceremony has moved to a view-only format, being broadcast via an HBO special in accordance with government-mandated safety precautions. I will not be talking about my thoughts about the precautions when it comes to COVID-19. We will keep this a Depeche Mode focused podcast. Among this year's inductees are Depeche Mode, the trailblazing electronic music outfit who changed rock music forever. Again, I'm reading directly from this press release. The band's sound represents one of the most prominent fusions between rock and electronica, sparking a trend that would be intimidated by bands throughout the 1990s and present day, and heralding an era in which electronic music was prevalently incorporated into the mainstream. Depeche Mode's induction sees them honored alongside fellow electronic fusion act Nine Inch Nails, late R&B and soul icon Whitney Houston, and the legendary rapper Notorious B.I.G. HBO and HBO Max will broadcast the 2020 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Right? This will take place on November 7th, said a representative in a tweet. Due to ongoing COVID-19 concerns, the live 2020 HOF induction ceremony concert on 11/7. Oh, so this was okay, so I'm sorry. This is still right. Okay. The live version is canceled. I guess they were still planning on doing a live version. But in place of the live event, we will broadcast an exclusive special about the Rock and Roll 2020 inductees on HBO and HBO Max on November 7th at 8 p.m. Though the cancellation comes as no surprise, given the current global situation, fans can still view all the festivities via HBO and watch as one of electronic music's driving forces, Depeche Mode, are honored among a number of other seminal music acts. For more information, you can go to the 2020 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony and visit the official website. So, I don't know if the plan was for the band to perform if they had done it live. It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening, and I'm obviously curious to see what the band has to say. It's a bummer that it has to be in a format like this, but at least it's happening, and we all have the opportunity to go and watch still online. So that is fantastic news, and one that I have certainly marked my calendar for. It is a recognition for this band that is so well deserved, I think, in your opinion and in my opinion. And after all this time of being a Depeche Mode fan, and, for those of us, I know that there are some people out there who stopped being a fan of this band when it became more popular. I have actually friends that did back in the day. I remember when Violator, ended up sort of crossing over and Enjoy the Silence and Personal Jesus became more mainstream hits. There is that type of fan that suddenly doesn't like it when that thing that they love becomes that successful. But, even despite that, the longevity of this band and what I feel is a lack of respect for them, this seems to be taking care of that for me. This is coming full circle to give this band their due, and I'm just thrilled. I mean, these guys have always seemed like friends to me. I've grown up with them, and if you've listened to the show before, you know my affinity for this band. I do a podcast about them, for crying out loud, so that's not a big, huge surprise. All right, so before we get to listener feedback this week, I want to mention something, and it's kind of Depeche Mode related, but more along the lines of nobody's ever going to be able to duplicate Depeche Mode. So I don't even know exactly how this... Oh, wait, yes, I do. This is how it happened. So here's just a little story, and we'll get your listener feedback. So I'm a big science fiction fan, right? I've mentioned that, and I write science fiction novels, which you can purchase by going to Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that once the show is over. So it was a movie, and it's only about 50 minutes long, so it's not technically a movie, but it was a series of 10-minute shorts, 10, 20-minute shorts, for the Shudder app. This is the horror movie of Netflix, right? I don't have the app. Okay, I'm not a big horror movie fan. But I had seen all this talk about a movie called Blood Machines. And it is a science fiction cosmic space opera. I don't recommend things normally because you don't ever know what people's tastes are. I really enjoyed this. It is graphic. It is very adult. I'll put it that way, right? I would not want my 13-year-old and maybe not even my 18-year-old watching it. But it was a very interesting, unique take on the science fiction genre. The thing that caught my attention and how I found out about it was through this music video for a song called Killer Turbo, and by Carpenter Brute. And I'd never heard of this before. And I saw the video, listened to the music, and it was just very hard driving electronic instrumental music, and I just loved it. And so I had seen some images from this movie Blood Machines, and so I was curious about it. So I watched it and the soundtrack and got a little bit familiar with Carpenter Brute. And I don't like everything that I've heard so far from this particular electronic artist, but I've enjoyed quite a bit of it. But through that, YouTube has their algorithms, and they'll choose things for you based off of stuff you watched. Well, I stumbled across this group called Gunship, and I love this band. There's a whole genre out there I didn't even know existed, and apparently it's called synthwave. And I'm sure there is an individual listening to this going, "Yes, John, we're very well aware of this. I've just discovered it, and it's a whole brand new world." Now, granted, a lot of it ain't great. It's very keyboard synth. It's very synth, right? Based, all electronic. A lot of it, reminds me of early 80s electronic music. Not necessarily Depeche Mode, but, obviously it has that relatability just from the musical standpoint, right? Being electronic-based music. This band Gunship, though, I've really, really gotten into. Really, really enjoy them. That being said, it does continue to demonstrate the uniqueness of Depeche Mode, because it's not that these bands that I'm hearing that I've discovered, right? Gunship, Carpenter Brute, like I mentioned, Time Cop, 1983. This is another one that I found. It's not that they're trying to be Depeche Mode. There's that relatability factor being from the 80s and electronic based. They have vocals attached to them, and Gunship's not all their music has vocals, but some of them do, and a lot of them are themed around movies. There's one about there's a song that they have that's centered around Ready Player One, and a lot of the videos that they have are homages to 80s films. It's just a lot of fun, and so you can't help but being a Depeche Mode fan to kind of put yourself in that same mindset. But again, it really does go and distinguish Depeche Mode for being so unique in what they've created and what they continue to create. They just have such a unique sound, and even back in the 80s and 90s, the closest thing you could get to it in terms of popularity was like a Nine Inch Nails or the Cure, but they were all very unique in their own singular ways as well. There just wasn't anybody out there that sounded or could do what Depeche Mode did and what they continue to do. They are so original, in my opinion, even in as much as they are influential. Certain bands, you look like Cause and Effect. I think Cause and Effect is a band that you can point to that, probably was closest in attempting to mirror what Depeche Mode did, but, even then, they fell short of the mark. There just is magic that takes place between Martin Gore and Dave Gahan that is going full circle on this, little road that I've gone down that is so worthy to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's never been any group or band like Depeche Mode, and there never will be another group or band like Depeche Mode. And the mark that they've left on the music industry, I'm so glad is going to be recognized in this induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I know they've gotten some recognition overseas, but the band has joked quite a bit about the fact that they felt like they never really got the respect that they deserved. They were passed off early on in their career as being sort of a boy pop band, and it just seems like a lot of the British press just never bothered to give them the appropriate credit that they deserved. I know that's changed a little bit. They've won some bigger, more high-profile awards, and there was, of course, the big event that took place at the Royal Albert Hall those many years ago where Alan came out and played on the piano. But it's just, growing up with this band, it's awesome to see them get the recognition that they deserve and still see their influence on bands like I was talking about, even though they're not trying to be Depeche Mode. It's clear that these bands were influenced by Depeche Mode. So if you've not checked out Gunship, I would definitely encourage you to do so. And if you have any recommendations, please send them my way. I'm always up for finding new music, and my musical tastes have really broadened since I've gotten older. Songs that I used to hate as a kid. I think it's like this for a lot of people. Now I absolutely love. So TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right, let's get to your listener feedback this week. Again, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. We'll start off with Andrea. It says, Dear John, I found your podcast not so long ago, and I love it. Thank you. I fell in love with this band in 2017, thanks to my husband, who is a fan since the 80s. We have seen them on this tour twice, and it was amazing. I totally agree with you on your last podcast. I love all their albums, and I can't wait to see them again, Andrea. Thank you so much, Andrea or Andrea, depending on how you pronounce it. I really do appreciate it. It is amazing to me, and it fills my heart with joy when I see people who find this band after all these years. There was a listener, her name is Severin, a listener to my Star Wars podcast that I do. And this was several months ago. She'd written that she had picked up my EMBARK books and was reading them and really enjoying them, and was unfamiliar with a lot of the band references that I made, including Depeche Mode. In book one specifically, I was really inspired by Ready Player One and Ernie Klein and the amount of pop culture that he infused into Ready Player One. It's such an incredibly fun read. And I really wanted to do that with the first story that I wrote in my science fiction series. And so the main character, Taft, is kind of an avatar of me. I mean, there's a lot of his personality is my personality, certainly his taste in music, but he is a massive Depeche Mode fan. And Severin decided to give Depeche Mode a chance and a listen based off of what she'd read from the book, and she ended up really loving the band. And it's funny because she actually got turned on by Sounds of the Universe as the first album she listened to, and that was enough to sort of seal the deal. I'll never forget, this is back in the 90s. I had a buddy of mine who had gone through the Academy of Radio Broadcasting with. His name was Jeff Shamrock. Jeff Gibbons, but we went by Jeff Shamrock. And he came over to my house one night, and he was a big Doors fan, right? A big fan of that era. Doors, Rolling Stone, the Beatles. Was not familiar with Depeche Mode. And I sat him down in my little apartment in Anaheim, California, down the street from Disneyland, and I popped in the VHS tape for Devotional. We had partaken. We had imbibed a bit, so we were both feeling very good. And we sat down and I think I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. And we watched all of the Devotional video by Anton Corbijn, my favorite concert performance that he shot. Love that video. DVD. And he was silent the whole time. And I thought for sure he was hating it. And I remember when it was all over, his jaw was just wide open. He's like, that was one of the most incredible concerts I've ever seen. How have I not found out about this band until now? And it was great. It was so great. It was something that I'll never forget. He now lives in Washington, D.C., and he did radio for a little while, but now he's a professional in another field. But he ended up becoming a big Depeche Mode fan because of that. There was a girl, Jennifer, that I dated for a little while right before. Actually, she was the last girl I dated before I met my wife, who was already a Depeche Mode fan. But I remember she ended up becoming a big Depeche Mode fan while we were dating. But it was awesome because Jeff was the individual who I took when I won the tickets to the exclusive one-off mini concert that the band did for the Ultra release. Right, the band didn't go, Depeche Mode didn't go on tour for that album. They waited until the singles album came out. Dave wasn't quite ready yet, but they did these two shows, one at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles and then one in London. and I won tickets off K-Rock to go to that exclusive show, and I was able to take Jeff. And as a matter of fact, I have the photo right behind me in the cabinet of me and Jeff with the band. It's the only photo I have with the band. I've met them a few times and gotten autographs, but that's the only photo I ever got with them, unfortunately. But I cherish that photo quite a bit and that time. All right, let's go to the next listener feedback. Thaddeus Gonzalez writes this. I'm a big fan of your podcast. I'm glad you do what you do. Thank you. I'm a singer-songwriter from Oakland, California. Please check me out when you can. I did, Thaddeus Gonzalez. I really dig your stuff, man. I like your style, and that is not normally the type of rock music that I gravitate towards, but I spent some time the other day and have since then listening to your music, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I would not be saying that if I didn't actually meet it, but I was like, all right, I'll check this out, and was really pleasantly surprised. Just good job, man. I wish you nothing but success. So Thaddeus goes on to say, my favorite band is Depeche Mode, with Metallica coming in a close second. I love that, by the way. Man, I love that. That was the thing back, I remember, back during that trilogy high point of the band, Music for the Masses, Violator, Songs of Faith and Devotion. And I remember during that time period in the rock area, in the rock genre, Guns N' Roses, being so huge. And I just remember like hearing rock bands talk about their fandom of bands like Depeche Mode and Nine Inch Nails at the time. I just always loved that. And so when I hear somebody who's a massive Depeche Mode fan and a Metallica fan, that's awesome to me. Right? I mean, I like Metallica too. I'm not a massive fan, but I do like Metallica. But it's just cool that your favorite bands are both of those. I think that's great. My favorite albums in order are Black Celebration, Ultra, Music for the Masses, Songs of Faith and Devotion, Broken Frame, Playing the Angel, Speak and Spell, Some Great Reward, Construction Time Again, Spirit, and then Delta Universe Exciter come in last, but I still dig them all. I did not include Violator because of its mass appeal. It is a classic for people who are not deep Depeche Mode fans. And that's really interesting to me, because it kind of goes back to what I talked about before, and I'm not lumping Thaddeus Gonzalez in this category, but it is very much in line with that attitude that I was talking about. And again, I have no problem with that. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. But that's just really interesting to me, that he didn't include Violator because of how mass appeal it was. That's really interesting. My favorite song is Nothing's Impossible. You are a deep fan. That's cool. This last episode really made me stoked. To hear DM is working on new music thrills me. I don't agree with you as far as the direction of the new album. I think they should go back to a Songs of Faith and Devotion sound. Louder guitars and more real drums. Okay. Really cut back on the synth sounds. They have been doing that vintage sound for the last 3 albums. Make a hard rock album. I think it would be very stylish and important for them. Depeche Mode always has great surprises, and I'm totally looking forward to it. I rewatched Spirit in the Forest last night. I saw it in the theaters last year. I disagree with you sort of disliking the animals on the screen for Enjoy the Silence. Animals do not talk. Thus the silence. All right, I'll give it to you. And then, by the way, I didn't say I didn't necessarily care for them. I just thought it was a little weird, right? It's funny, though, because that's one of those things when it comes to Anton's visuals that changes. Like, when I'm younger, right, when you're younger, you're just, especially when you're just a hardcore fan and you're younger of anything, right? And we'll just say, you're a hardcore, mid-20s fan of Depeche Mode, and that version of Jon Justice gave the band a free pass on everything and loved all of it. My point is, Anton Corbijn does Barnyard Animals in his visuals on the World Violation Tour. It's the greatest imagery I've ever seen. Anton Corbijn does Barnyard Animals on visuals for a 2017 concert in which Jon Justice is 45, 46 years old, and it's like, meh. I also really enjoyed that the sun was still out for the first few songs. Interesting. I thought it allowed dimension and mood to change during the movie. All right. I was bummed Inside was not on my version. Sounds like the Blu-ray is way cooler. Because of COVID, I have not been able to tour. It's really messed up the music business. Yeah, I've heard. I do live acoustic shows now on Facebook. It's the way to go. I've decided to reinterpret Violator acoustically, playing the songs in order. I'm going to shoot for an August show. Let me know, man. I definitely want to check it out. I just finished this book. It's a very interesting read. It was mostly about Basildon, UK. I enjoyed it as the band slowly got together. If you'd like me to send it to you, let me know. No, man, I'll get my own copy. But thanks for that, Thaddeus. I really do appreciate it. Glad to reach out to you, Thaddeus Gonzalez. No, Thaddeus, thanks for reaching out to me, man. I really do appreciate it. And keep up what you're doing. I am very much looking forward to watching or hearing you do Violator acoustically. That sounds rad. And I'm bringing that back, by the way. So thank you, Thaddeus. All right, last email this week. Lee writes this. I very much enjoyed your Depeche Mode podcast and can relate to your growing up with Depeche Mode reflections. I was just wondering if I'm the only one who has never recovered from Alan Wilder's departure. It always brings about a certain melancholy when I see them live post-devotional or knowing he's not in the studio with them. How do you reflect on Alan Wilder and his lack of presence in DM post-1995? I had intended on, and I still do, on doing a show about Alan Wilder and his effect on the band and what it's meant and what's happened with the band since he left. And I still plan on doing that. But in light of your question, let me go ahead and answer a bit of it now, and something I'll do in more detail on a subsequent show. I was, as a fan during that time period, and I've told the story before about how finding out as the facts came over at KCXX X103.9 in Riverside, San Bernardino, California, where I was working with the announcement, the press release that Alan was leaving, and there was so much concern around that time, anyhow, with the band. Especially with Dave and everything that had gone on with him, and I'm not sure which came first. I'm pretty sure Alan leaving the band was after Dave's overdose, if I'm not mistaken. I got over it pretty quick, simply because I wanted the band to continue to make music, and I wanted to see what they could do without Alan Wilder, and I feel like they've done a really fantastic job since then. They've definitely shifted their sound a bit. I think Thaddeus was on to something they have. They've had a bit of a formula over the course of the last few albums. I think that the band had a lot more highs consistently with Alan Wilder in the band than post when he left. I think Depeche Mode has made some equally as good of music without Alan, but I find that the highs are just as high, but the lows seem a little bit lower. There was certainly something that left the band when Alan left, and it seems to me that every time they've worked on a record, the producer has always become, and it's always been important to the band, but the producer for records certainly became a crucial component to the band's process, because I feel like, their producers for any particular record had to fill that and have to fill that void that Alan left when he left the band. I think it's one of the reasons why Ben Hillier stuck around for 3 albums as he did. I thought the producer on the last album did a good job from a sonic standpoint. But there certainly was something that went away when Alan left the band. That's not to say that it would have been any better had he been there, right? Who knows? There is, an argument to be made that if Alan had stayed in the band, the band may have progressed differently and, maybe didn't make as good of music even with Alan in the band. So maybe this was the best thing that could happen to him. It's interesting to me when you look at what Alan Wilder's done on his own compared to what he's done on Depeche Mode, and what he's done on his own has been a lot less, it is. It's a lot less mainstream. It's a lot less accessible to an average listener. It's more avant-garde, right? More experimental. And he was like that when he did his Recoil stuff, even with the band. So it was always interesting to me that, what we got from Alan Wilder outside of Depeche Mode was really far from what Depeche Mode did. But I think that's where he injected life into all of the music that he made with Depeche Mode, because Depeche Mode's music does have a sensibility. Does have a sensibility to it, an accessibility to it, a relatability to it, and that's because of Martin's lyrics. And the experimentation that we get from Alan Wilder outside of Depeche Mode, he was able to bring that into Depeche Mode and bring in this more thematic element to the music. And if I was going to zero down to one thing that Alan Wilder did that has lacked in Depeche Mode, it is that thematic element, that cinematic, large epicness that Alan brings and brought to the band. When he did his remix of In Chains, a song that I love, apart from the slow build until the song kicks in, I really like the second half of his remix of In Chains. I actually like it more than the album version was. And there might be some projection there. That might be my projecting of, this is the only time that we've gotten Alan to work with Depeche Music since he left the band, and therefore I like it more. That there could be a part of that. But there is an epicness to that particular song In Chains that he brought to it that wasn't in the original version. And I think that if you injected Alan Wilder into the work that Depeche Mode's done, if you just said, these are the songs that Depeche Mode are going to make, and here's Alan Wilder to come in and put his influence on him, I think that he could probably raise a lot of what Depeche Mode has done over the course of the past 15, 20 years since he's left and bring it up to another level. But that's not how things played out, right? Alan left the band, and it's a blessing that the band has continued to make music and is continuing to make music even after he left. And great music, too. Don't misunderstand. So I kind of feel like that was all over the map. That's a long answer to your question, and at some point in time we'll do a show where we focus just on Alan Wilder, and we'll get into a lot of specifics of certain tracks, some of his solo stuff that he's done, and hopefully get some emails from you. Speaking of which, email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. I can add it if you want to talk a little Alan Wilder. I can add it to the email and save it for the Alan Wilder episode that I'll eventually do. So I'm not quite on a weekly basis with the show at the moment. I'm kind of looking at doing the show for when the mood strikes and there's stuff to talk about, and I've been very much in a Depeche mood as of late, so I thought, you know what, I'll sit down and do a show. And I really appreciated the listener feedback. Thanks to everybody who emailed this week. I really do appreciate it. All right, I'm going to wrap the show up. Stick around, though. Right after the outro, I want to talk a little bit about my science fiction space opera series, what's coming up with the Embarq series as well. So if you've purchased the books already, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You might want to stick around if you've enjoyed them, because I have a little bit of news to share. If this is all of what you're going to listen to of the podcast, thanks for checking it out. I appreciate it. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Go to mynerdworld.net, and I will talk to you again very soon.
My Nerd World.
All right, welcome to the post show. Thanks for sticking around. All right, just real quick, I want to talk a little bit about the Embarq trilogy that's available right now at mynerdworld.net. This is the first you are hearing about these science fiction novels. Let me get you up to speed. I'm a massive Star Wars Depeche Mode fan. I mentioned that before. I challenged myself. This is going back to 2015, 2016. I had a story in mind, and I wanted to know whether or not I could write a novel, something that I never expected I would do. Flash forward now. First book was released in 2018. Second book in the series in 2019. I just released the third book in the trilogy, closing out this series of stories. But the stories continue. I'll give you details on what is coming out later this year and what is in the works. But to get you up to speed, here's a little bit about what these stories are all about. In book one of Embarq, it's a science fiction adventure set in the future. Story of a boy, a Depeche Mode fan, who's in love with a girl in the middle of the apocalypse. The greatest technological advancement ever made has gone missing, and Earth is now at risk. The hunt is on to find the only hope for humanity's survival. Flight culture has replaced car culture. Okay. Taftgardia is going to have to fight with his friends to save humanity and the girl he loves. It's an exciting space opera for those who love movies and love to read and science fiction. And it really is a mix of Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Fast and Furious. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. And Ready Player One in this fast-paced opening chapter to the trilogy. And like I've mentioned, I spiked in a lot of pop culture references. I built in a device in the movie where at this time in Earth's future, the popular music of the day is the music of the eras that I grew up in. They call it the Grand Age Rock era. And so this was an opportunity for me to make Taftgardia, the hero of the story, a massive Depeche Mode fan. And so there's a lot of Depeche Mode references, direct and indirect, along with a lot of other pop culture references and music that I love inside the story. Like I said earlier, I want to do a little bit of what Ernie Klein did in Ready Player One. In Book 2, after having survived a planet-wide apocalypse on Earth, spoiler alert, but I figured you kind of figured that happened, now Taft and his friends on a far-off world have to unravel the mystery of a lethal threat to their new way of life. They took something that is the most precious thing, and now our heroes will fight and do whatever it takes to get that thing back. That's what takes place in Embarq, Treasure in Darkness, Book 2. And then, in Embarq, The Vanishing War, Book 3, the only way that the Raider Alliance can stop a ruthless galactic dictator is with the truth. And the question is, will humanity in a far-off world, in a far-off galaxy, believe them? And that's the closing chapter of the opening trilogy. I have just wrapped up Book 4 in the series. This is going to be a singular Embarq adventure based off of an event that takes place in Book 3. It's currently in the editing phase and will be available here probably sometime mid to late September. More details about that, including the cover art, and the cover art for all the books, is available on mynerdworld.net, so go and check it out. So, purchasing any of the Embarq books, either ebook, a paperback, or audiobook, is how you can support the show. I don't do the Patreon deal, right? And if you want to support the show, pick yourself up a copy of whatever format you choose for you or a friend. That's how you can go and support the show. For those that have, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And lastly, for those that have purchased the books, if you have not left a review for any of the books, or you've just left a review for one, I need all the reviews I can get. Reviews are crucial when it comes to future sales of the novels. So if you could leave a review at Amazon.com right now as soon as the show is over, I would really, really appreciate it. And those reviews can only come from individuals who purchase the books. So pick yourself up a copy. Go to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and Embarq, or go to mynerdworld.net and click the yellow and black button right there on the homepage. Support My Nerd World podcasts and grab yourself a couple of great science fiction books. I really would appreciate it. All right, that's it. We'll be back again real soon. Have yourself a fantastic week. Keep yourself safe and healthy. And thanks so much for the support of My Nerd World. I really do appreciate it.
My Nerd World.